The blood-red sunset painted the horizon as Genevieve Zeller stared at the fading tracks in the dirt, clutching her youngest child to her chest while tears threatened to spill from her exhausted eyes. The wagon wheel had broken 3 days ago, and now she and her 10 children were hopelessly lost in the vast, unforgiving expanse of the Wyoming Territory, with nothing but dwindling supplies and the looming specter of an early winter. Wyoming Territory, 1876. Genevieve had never imagined she would find herself in such dire straits. At 32 years old, she had been a pillar of strength since her husband Thomas died from pneumonia last winter, leaving her alone with their 10 children and a dream of starting anew in Oregon. The promise of free land and a fresh beginning had seemed worth the risk when they'd departed from Illinois 4 months ago. Now, as the cold wind whipped through her worn shawl, she wondered if she had made the gravest mistake of her life. "Mama, I'm hungry," 5-year-old Samuel whimpered, tugging at her skirt. His cheeks, once plump and rosy, had grown gaunt over the past several days. "I know, darling," Genevieve whispered, running a hand through his sandy hair. "We'll eat soon." She glanced at the remaining food in their broken-down wagon, perhaps enough for 2 more days, if she continued to take only the smallest portions for herself. 16-year-old Robert, her eldest, approached with a grim expression that aged him beyond his years. "Ma, I've been up that ridge. Can't see the trail from there either. I think we need to stay put until morning." Sarah, 14 and already bearing the responsibilities of a grown woman, was settling the younger children for the night. Twins Mary and Martha, 11, were helping gather what little firewood they could find. 8-year-old William kept watch over Joseph, who at 7 was always wandering. Little Elizabeth, just 3, clung to her sister Hannah, 6, while baby Grace, barely a year old, fussed in the makeshift crib. Genevieve nodded at Robert, fighting to keep her voice steady. "You're right. We'll make camp here tonight and try again tomorrow." But in her heart, Genevieve knew they were in serious trouble. They'd been traveling with a larger wagon train until a week ago, when she'd decided to take a supposed shortcut suggested by a passing traveler. That decision now haunted her as the vast wilderness seemed to swallow them whole. As night fell and the children huddled together for warmth around their meager fire, Genevieve stepped away into the darkness and finally allowed her tears to fall. "Thomas," she whispered to the star-filled sky, "I've failed them. I don't know what to do." Miles away, Levi Tucker squinted at the darkening horizon from atop his paint horse, Diablo. At 35, he'd spent most of his life in these wild lands, working as a scout, rancher, and occasionally as a deputy when the local sheriff needed extra hands. The weathered lines around his eyes spoke of days spent beneath the harsh sun, and the scar running along his jawline told of dangers faced and survived. Levi hadn't planned on riding this far from his small ranch today, but something had drawn him deeper into the foothills. Perhaps it was instinct born from years of tracking, or perhaps it was something more, a feeling he couldn't explain, but had learned never to ignore. He'd spotted unusual tracks earlier, a wagon with a distinctive crack in one wheel, accompanied by numerous footprints of varying sizes, including many small ones. Children, he'd realized, and many of them. The tracks were several days old, heading in a direction that made no sense if the travelers were aiming for any known settlement. "Someone's lost out there, Diablo," he murmured to his horse. The animal's ears twitched in response. As the last light faded from the sky, Levi made a decision. He would follow those tracks at first light. Someone needed help, and in this unforgiving country, help often arrived too late or not at all. Morning brought no relief for Genevieve. She awoke to find Grace feverish, her small face flushed as she whimpered in discomfort. "It's just a slight fever," Sarah said, trying to sound reassuring as she placed a cool cloth on the baby's forehead. "She'll be fine, Ma." But Genevieve knew better. Out here, With no medicine and dwindling water, even a mild illness could become deadly. She looked at her children, 10 precious souls depending on her, and felt the weight of their trust like a physical burden. "Robert," she said, making a decision, "I want you to take Mary, Martha, and William with you to the top of that hill. See if you can spot any sign of a settlement, any smoke from chimneys, anything at all." "What about the rest of us?" Sarah asked. "We'll stay with the wagon. I don't want to risk moving Grace until her fever breaks." Genevieve tried to sound confident, though inside she was terrified. "We still have a little food. We'll be all right." As Robert and the others set off, Genevieve settled beside the wagon, cradling Grace while keeping an eye on the younger children. Samuel and Joseph were playing a quiet game with stones, their usual energy subdued by hunger. Elizabeth and Hannah sat nearby, making little dolls from scraps of cloth. They were being so brave, all of them, and the thought brought fresh tears to Genevieve's eyes. "Don't cry, Mama," Elizabeth said, crawling into her lap beside the baby. "The angels will help us." Genevieve kissed her daughter's forehead. "I'm sure they will, sweetheart." By mid-morning, Levi had picked up the trail again. The signs told a clear story: a broken wagon, adults and children on foot, movements becoming more erratic as they lost their bearings. The tracker in him calculated they were at least 2 days ahead, but their pace would be slow with children. He urged Diablo faster, a sense of urgency growing within him. The weather had been mild, but that could change quickly in these parts. A lost family with children wouldn't survive the coming cold nights for long. Around noon, Levi paused at the crest of a hill, scanning the landscape. In the distance, he spotted movement, 4 figures making their way up a distant ridge. Even from this distance, he could tell by their size that at least some were children. "Found you," he murmured, turning Diablo in their direction. Robert spotted the rider first. "Look!" he shouted, pointing at the approaching horsemen. "Someone's coming." Mary and Martha clutched each other's hands, while William stood protectively in front of his sisters. They'd been warned about strangers in these wild lands. "Should we run?" Mary asked, her voice trembling. Robert shook his head. "No. If he means harm, he'd catch us anyway. Besides, we need help." He straightened his shoulders, trying to look older than his 16 years. As the rider drew closer, they could see he was tall and broad-shouldered, with a weathered face partially shadowed by his wide-brimmed hat. His clothing was dusty from the trail, but his eyes were alert and assessing as he reined his horse to a stop a respectful distance away. "You kids look like you could use some help," the man said, his voice deep but gentle. "Our wagon broke down," Robert explained. "We got lost. Our mother and the other children are back that way." He pointed in the direction they'd come from. The man nodded slowly. "Name's Levi Tucker. I've been tracking your trail since yesterday." His eyes softened as he looked at the children's tired faces. "How many of you are there?" "10 children, sir, and our mother," Robert answered. "I'm Robert Zeller. These are my sisters Mary and Martha, and my brother William." 10, Levi repeated, unable to hide his surprise. Then he dismounted in one fluid motion. "Well, Robert, let's get back to your mother and the others. I've got some food in my saddlebags, and I know these hills better than most." Relief washed over Robert's face. "Thank you, sir." Levi smiled slightly. "Just Levi will do." Back at the wagon, Genevieve was growing more worried by the minute. Grace's fever hadn't broken, and the other children were becoming restless with hunger and fear. When she heard approaching footsteps, she clutched the rifle they kept for protection, holding it awkwardly as she peered into the distance. The sight of her eldest son walking beside a tall stranger sent a jolt of fear through her, until she saw the relaxed posture of her other children trailing behind them. "Ma!" Robert called out. "This is Mr. Tucker. He's been tracking us. He's going to help." Levi removed his hat as he approached, revealing dark hair streaked with silver at the temples. His eyes, a striking blue against his sun-darkened skin, assessed the situation quickly before meeting Genevieve's gaze. Something passed between them in that moment, a recognition perhaps of shared resilience, of lives shaped by hardship and determination. For Genevieve, who had long since resigned herself to a life of solitary struggle, the connection was as unexpected as it was powerful. "Mrs. Zeller," Levi said with a respectful nod, "your children found me or I found them. Been following your trail since yesterday." "Why would you do that?" Genevieve asked, still cautious despite her relief. "Spotted signs of a family in trouble. Out here, that's reason enough." He gestured toward the baby in her arms. "Your little one's sick?" Genevieve nodded, her protective instincts warring with her desperate need for help. "Grace has a fever. I've been trying to keep her cool, but—" Levi reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a small tin. "My mother's remedy. Willow bark and a few other things. Helps with fever." He offered it to her. "I've also got food, not much, but enough to share." The mention of food caused the children to look up hopefully. Genevieve studied Levi's face, searching for any sign of deception. All she found was honest concern and something else, a kindness that seemed at odds with his rugged appearance. "Thank you," she said finally, lowering the rifle. "We're grateful for any help you can offer." Levi nodded, then turned to survey their broken wagon. "Wheels beyond repair," he observed, "but my ranch is about a day's ride from here. I've got a wagon there and supplies. We can make it if we start soon." "Your ranch?" Genevieve asked. "Small place, but it's mine. Plenty of room for you and your children until we can figure out your next steps." He met her eyes again. "I give you my word, Mrs. Zeller. You'll be safe there." Genevieve considered their options, which were, in truth, non-existent. Stay here and face starvation or worse, or trust this stranger who had gone out of his way to find them. "Very well, Mr. Tucker," she decided. "We accept your help. And please, call me Genevieve." Levi's mouth curved in a slight smile. "Levi, then." As Levi shared his provisions among the eager children, Genevieve prepared the willow bark remedy for Grace. The baby fussed at the bitter taste, but swallowed enough that Genevieve felt hopeful. "We'll need to travel light," Levi explained as they ate. "Take only what's essential. The younger children can ride Diablo for stretches. We'll all have to walk some, but we should reach my place by tomorrow evening if we push hard." "We'll manage," Genevieve assured him, watching as her children seemed to come alive again with food in their bellies and hope restored. They packed quickly, salvaging what they could from the wagon. Levi fashioned a sling for Genevieve to carry Grace against her chest, leaving her hands free. The older children shouldered small bundles, while Levi took the heaviest items himself. As they set out, with Levi leading the way and 3-year-old Elizabeth perched atop Diablo, Genevieve felt a flutter of something she hadn't experienced in a very long time: hope. The journey was arduous. By mid-afternoon, even the older children were flagging, their earlier energy depleted by the rough terrain and the persistent sun. Levi rotated which children rode the horse, ensuring the youngest got the most rest. He set a pace that was challenging but manageable, stopping frequently to allow them to catch their breath. During one such rest, as the children huddled in the shade of a large rock, Levi approached Genevieve where she sat nursing Grace. "She's looking better," he observed, nodding toward the baby, whose color had indeed improved. "Yes, your remedy helped. Thank you." Genevieve adjusted her shawl for modesty. "You're good with children, Mr. Tucker." "Levi, do you have some of your own?" A shadow crossed his face. "No, never had the chance to start a family." He paused, then added, "My sister had 4 before she passed. Diphtheria took her and 3 of the little ones. Her eldest, my nephew James, lives with me now. He's about Robert's age." I'm sorry for your loss, Genevieve said softly. Levi nodded in acknowledgement. Life out here is hard on women and children. You've done well keeping yours alive and together. We've had our share of close calls. Thomas, my husband, died last winter. Pneumonia. We were planning this journey together. She looked out at the vast landscape. I thought I could do it alone. Foolish pride, perhaps. Not foolish, Levi countered. Brave. Misguided maybe, but brave nonetheless. His eyes crinkled slightly at the corners. Besides, you're not alone now. The simple statement, delivered without flourish or expectation, touched Genevieve deeply. For months, she had carried the weight of her family's survival entirely on her shoulders, making every decision, solving every problem, bearing every consequence. The prospect of sharing that burden, even temporarily, was almost overwhelming. No, she agreed quietly, not alone. They traveled until dusk, making camp in a sheltered grove near a small spring. Levi built a fire and produced a rabbit he'd shot along the way, preparing a stew that the children devoured gratefully. As night fell and the younger children drifted to sleep, huddled together for warmth, Robert approached Levi where he sat keeping watch. My father taught me to shoot, the boy said, settling beside him. I should have been hunting for us when we were lost. I failed them. Levi considered the young man thoughtfully. Your father would be proud of how you've stepped up for your family, but even the best hunter can't find game where there isn't any. This area's been overhunted by passing travelers. How did you find us? Robert asked. Years of tracking. The army taught me during the war, and I refined those skills afterward. Scouting for wagon trains and hunting bounties occasionally. Levi poked at the fire. Your mother's a remarkable woman, raising 10 children on her own. Robert nodded. She never complains, but I know it's been hard since Pa died. She cries sometimes, when she thinks we're all asleep. Levi's heart tightened at the image. It's a heavy burden she carries. We're heading to Oregon, Robert continued. Ma's brother has land there, said we could join him. He hesitated. At least, that was the plan before we got lost. Oregon's still there, Levi said. You just took a detour. Robert smiled slightly. I guess so. Good night, Mr. Tucker, and thank you. As the boy returned to his siblings, Levi found his gaze drawn to Genevieve, who was settling Grace for the night. There was a grace to her movements, a quiet dignity despite her worn dress and exhausted features. Something about her stirred feelings in Levi that he'd long thought buried protectiveness, admiration, and a more complex emotion he wasn't ready to name. Morning came with a light frost covering the ground, a stark reminder of the approaching winter. They ate a quick breakfast of the remaining stew and set off again, Levi estimating they would reach his ranch by nightfall if they maintained a steady pace. The terrain grew more familiar as the day progressed, and Levi's steps became more confident. The children, buoyed by the prospect of reaching safety, chattered more freely, asking Levi questions about his ranch and life in the territory. Do you have cows? Joseph asked, walking beside Levi with renewed energy. Some cattle, yes, and horses. A few chickens, too, Levi answered. It's not a big spread, but it's enough. And your nephew lives there? Sarah inquired, curious about the boy her brother's age. James helps run things when I'm away. He's a good lad, though he can be quiet around strangers. Levi glanced at Genevieve. Fair warning, Mrs. Zeller. He might be a bit overwhelmed by so many guests at first. We'll try not to impose for long, Genevieve assured him. Once we've rested and restocked our supplies, we'll continue to Oregon. Levi nodded, though something in his expression suggested he had more to say on the matter. Winter comes early in these parts. Might be safer to wait until spring before tackling the mountains. The implication of his words hung in the air between them months, not days, at his ranch. The prospect should have alarmed Genevieve, Yet she found herself not entirely opposed to the idea. There was something about Levi Tucker that inspired trust, a steadiness that reminded her of Thomas, yet different in ways she couldn't quite define. Late afternoon brought them to the edge of a valley, and Levi pointed to a cluster of buildings nestled against a backdrop of pine trees. There it is, Tucker Ranch. The sight, modest though it was, brought tears to Genevieve's eyes. A sturdy main house, a barn, corrals, and several outbuildings, it represented safety and shelter after days of desperate wandering. As they descended into the valley, a figure emerged from the barn, a lanky young man who raised a hand in greeting before rushing forward to meet them. "Uncle Levi was starting to worry," the boy called out. His eyes widened as he took in the procession of children. "You, bring back some strays." "James," Levi said with a hint of fond exasperation, "this is Mrs. Zeller and her children. Their wagon broke down, and they'll be staying with us for a while." James, a tall youth with Levi's blue eyes but lighter hair, looked momentarily overwhelmed before gathering himself. "Madam," he greeted Genevieve with an awkward bow, "welcome to Tucker Ranch." Robert stepped forward, extending his hand. "Robert Zeller. These are my brothers and sisters." As the two boys shook hands, sizing each other up, Genevieve felt a wave of exhaustion crash over her. The relief of reaching safety, combined with days of stress and little sleep, left her lightheaded. She swayed slightly, drawing Levi's immediate attention. "Whoa there," he murmured, his hand steadying her elbow. "Let's get you inside. James, take Diablo to the barn, then help bring in whatever supplies the Zellers have." The main house was simple but well-maintained, with a large central room containing a stone fireplace, a wooden table with benches, and several chairs. A cast-iron stove dominated one wall, and the smell of something cooking made the children's stomachs rumble audibly. "I made stew," James explained, noticing their reaction. "Not as good as Uncle Levi's, but it's hot." "It smells wonderful," Genevieve assured him. Levi led them through the house, showing them the sleeping arrangements. "James and I will take the bunkhouse out back. You and the girls can have my room and the spare room. The boys can sleep here by the fire." "We can't put you out of your home," Genevieve protested. "It's no hardship. The bunkhouse is plenty comfortable." Levi's tone brooked no argument. "Get settled, rest. We'll eat when you're ready." That first meal at Tucker Ranch was a revelation. The stew, though simple, was hearty and plentiful, accompanied by fresh bread James had baked that morning. The children ate until they were satisfied for the first time in days, their faces glowing with contentment. As they ate, Levi explained their situation to James, who gradually relaxed as he realized these unexpected guests weren't a threat to his and his uncle's quiet existence. "So, you're heading to Oregon?" James asked Robert. "I've heard it rains all the time there." "My uncle says it's the most beautiful place in the world," Robert replied. "Green year-round, with the best soil for farming you could ask for." James looked skeptical. "Sounds wet?" Levi caught Genevieve's eye across the table, sharing a small smile at the boys' exchange. In that moment of connection, something shifted between them, a recognition that perhaps this unexpected meeting was more than mere chance. After dinner, as the children settled for their first night in real bed since leaving Illinois, Genevieve joined Levi on the porch. The night was clear, stars blazing overhead in a way that still took her breath away after months on the trail. "I don't know how to thank you properly," she said quietly. "You saved our lives today." Levi leaned against the porch railing, his profile strong in the moonlight. "Anyone would have done the same." "No," Genevieve disagreed. "Not everyone would track a lost family for days, then open their home to 11 strangers." He turned to face her, his expression serious. "Mrs. Zeller, Genevieve, I meant what I said about winter coming. The high passes will be dangerous, if not impassable, within weeks. You and your children are welcome to stay until spring. That's too much to ask, she protested. We've already imposed. It's not an imposition, he interrupted gently. This place, it's too quiet sometimes. James would benefit from the company of other young people. He hesitated. And I find I'm not opposed to the idea of having a full house for a change. Genevieve studied him, this man who had appeared in their lives like an answer to a desperate prayer. You're a good man, Levi Tucker. He shook his head slightly. Just a man who recognizes a chance to do right when it presents itself. His eyes met hers. Consider it, at least, for the children's sake. I will, she promised. Good night, Levi. Good night, Genevieve. The days that followed established a routine that surprised everyone with how naturally it developed. The older children, eager to earn their keep, joined in the ranch chores. Robert and William worked alongside Levi and James, learning about cattle and horses, repairing fences, and tending to the daily needs of the property. Sarah, Mary, and Martha helped with cooking, cleaning, and caring for the younger children, while also taking on the chicken coop and vegetable garden. Genevieve, recovered from her exhaustion, proved to be a skilled homemaker, transforming the functional but sparse house into a warm home with small touches, wildflowers in jars, curtains fashioned from spare fabric, reorganized furniture that created cozy spaces for reading and conversation. Levi, accustomed to a bachelor's existence, found himself increasingly drawn to the domestic scenes that now filled his home. The sight of Genevieve kneading bread, her sleeves rolled up and flour dusting her cheek, or reading to the younger children by the fire in the evening, stirred something profound in him. One afternoon, about 2 weeks after their arrival, Levi returned from checking cattle to find Genevieve hanging laundry in the yard, baby Grace sleeping peacefully in a basket nearby. The October sunlight caught in her auburn hair, which she'd pinned less severely than usual, allowing tendrils to escape around her face. "Need a hand?" he offered, approaching her with his hat in his hands. She looked up, surprised, then smiled. "I wouldn't turn it down. These sheets are unwieldy." They worked together in comfortable silence for a few minutes, the white sheets billowing between them in the gentle breeze. "You've changed this place," Levi said finally. "For the better." Genevieve glanced at him. "I hope we haven't overstepped. I know we're guests." "No, that's not what I meant." Levi secured a corner of the sheet to the line. "Before you and the children arrived, this was just a place to sleep and eat. Now it feels like a home again." "Again?" she questioned softly. Levi's hands stilled. "My parents built this place. After they died influenza, both within days of each other, I kept it going, but something was missing. When my sister lived nearby with her family, they visited often. After she passed." He trailed off. "You and James have been alone," Genevieve finished for him. "We manage," he said with a shrug that couldn't quite disguise the loneliness beneath. "But the house was built for a family." Genevieve felt a flutter in her chest at his words and the way his eyes held hers. "Children need stability," she said carefully. "After losing their father, this constant movement has been hard on them. I see how they've blossomed here, with space to run and regular meals." "They're remarkable children," Levi said. "A credit to their parents." "Thomas would have liked you," she said suddenly. "He valued honesty and hard work above all else." "He sounds like a man worth knowing." Levi picked up another sheet. "What was he like?" The question opened a floodgate. Genevieve found herself telling Levi about Thomas, his gentle humor, his dreams for their children, his determination to provide a better life. It had been so long since she'd spoken of him to someone who hadn't known him, and the memories flowed freely, without the sharp pain that had accompanied them in the early days of grief. Levi listened attentively, his questions thoughtful, his reactions genuine. When she finally fell silent, She realized they had finished hanging all the laundry and were simply standing together in the yard, the afternoon sun warming their shoulders. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For what?" "For listening. For understanding that I can miss him without being broken by it." Levi nodded slowly. Grief changes shape over time, but it doesn't diminish what was lost. His hand moved as if to touch hers, then fell back to his side. "I should check on the boys. They're mending the corral fence." As he walked away, Genevieve found herself watching him, aware of a growing complexity in her feelings toward this quiet, steadfast man who had saved her family and asked for nothing in return. Inside the house, Sarah was preparing dinner with Martha, while the younger children played a game at the table under Joseph's supervision. The scene of domestic tranquility struck Genevieve forcefully, how quickly they had adapted to this place, how at home they all seemed. "Ma," Sarah said, looking up from the pot she was stirring. "James says the first snow might come next week." "Does he?" Genevieve hung her apron on a peg. "Well, we should be prepared then." "Does that mean we're staying for the winter?" Sarah asked, a hopeful note in her voice that Genevieve couldn't miss. I think it might be wise," Genevieve admitted. "The mountain passes would be treacherous this time of year, especially with the little ones." Sarah smiled, exchanging a glance with Martha that told Genevieve her daughters had already formed their own opinions on the matter. "Mr. Tucker says we're welcome as long as we need to stay." "He's a generous man," Genevieve said carefully. "He looks at you," Martha said suddenly, her 11-year-old directness catching Genevieve off guard. "When you're not watching. The way Pa used to look at you." Heat rose to Genevieve's cheeks. "Martha, that's hardly appropriate conversation." But the twins just giggled and returned to their cooking, leaving Genevieve to wonder if her own growing feelings were as transparent as Martha suggested Levi's were. The predicted snow arrived right on schedule, coating the ranch in a pristine blanket of white that delighted the younger children. Samuel and Joseph spent hours building snow forts with James, while Elizabeth and Hannah made snow angels under Sarah's watchful eye. Inside, Genevieve found herself gravitating toward Levi more frequently, sharing coffee by the fire in the early mornings before the household awoke, discussing books in the evenings after the children were in bed. These quiet moments revealed layers to him she hadn't expected: his love of poetry, his knowledge of history, his deep connection to the land. As November deepened toward December, the reality of their situation became clearer. They were no longer guests merely passing through, but a part of the daily fabric of life at Tucker Ranch. James had formed a solid friendship with Robert, the two boys constantly engaged in good-natured competition. The younger children looked to Levi with growing affection, particularly Samuel, who followed him like a shadow whenever possible. One evening, as a blizzard howled outside, the entire household gathered in the main room. Levi and Robert were teaching the younger boys to play checkers, while the girls worked on sewing projects. Baby Grace, now recovered and thriving, crawled from person to person, delighting in the attention she received. Genevieve, watching from her chair by the fire, felt a profound sense of rightness. This unexpected detour, which had seemed so disastrous when their wagon first broke down, had led them to something precious, a place where her children could heal from the loss of their father and the hardships of their journey. When Grace crawled to Levi and pulled herself up using his pant leg, he lifted her effortlessly into his lap, continuing his explanation of checker strategy to Samuel without missing a beat. The baby patted his face with her small hands, and Levi's smile in response was breathtaking in its tenderness. Later, after the children had gone to bed, Genevieve found Levi alone on the porch, despite the bitter cold. She wrapped her shawl tighter and joined him, their breath forming clouds in the frigid air. "You'll freeze out here," she chided gently. "Just needed a moment to think," he replied, but made no move to go inside. "Grace has taken quite a shine to you," Genevieve observed. "She's usually wary of strangers." Levi smiled slightly. She's a charmer. All your children are remarkable, each in their own way. They've come to care for you, she said carefully. And for James. And I for them. He turned to face her, his expression serious in the dim light spilling from the window. Genevieve, I've been thinking. When he hesitated, she prompted. Yes? Spring will come eventually. You'll want to continue to Oregon, to the life you planned with Thomas. Yes, she said slowly, though the prospect no longer filled her with the same certainty it once had. I would understand completely, but I wanted you to know. He took a deep breath. There's a place for you here, for all of you, permanently, if you wanted it. The words hung in the air between them, their implication clear. This wasn't merely an offer of shelter or charity, but something far more profound. Levi, she began, her heart racing. Are you saying, I'm saying that I've come to care for you and your children more than I thought possible, he interrupted, the words tumbling out now. I know it hasn't been long, and I know you still honor Thomas's memory. I would never ask you to forget him. But if you could find room in your heart for new feelings, I believe we could build something good here. Together. Genevieve's eyes filled with tears, not of sorrow, but of overwhelming emotion. My children need stability, she said softly. They need a home. I'm offering that, Levi said, taking a careful step closer. But they also need a mother who's happy. Are you happy here, Genevieve? The question pierced straight to her heart. Yes, she whispered. I am. Levi's hand reached for hers, his touch warm despite the cold night. I don't have grand poetry or pretty words. I'm just a man who found a lost family and discovered that my own life was incomplete until then. Genevieve twined her fingers with his. Sometimes the simplest truths are the most profound. His other hand came up to gently touch her cheek. May I kiss you, Genevieve Zeller? Her answer was to rise on her toes, meeting him halfway as his lips found hers in a kiss that held promise, tenderness, and the beginning of something neither had expected to find in the vast wilderness of Wyoming. Christmas at Tucker Ranch was a celebration unlike any the property had seen in years. The house was decorated with pine boughs and handmade ornaments crafted by the children. James and the older boys had cut a perfect tree that now stood in the corner of the main room, adorned with strung berries and small carved wooden figures Levi had made over the years. On Christmas Eve, with snow falling gently outside, Levi gathered everyone in the main room. The children, sensing something important was about to happen, fell unusually quiet. I have something to ask your mother, Levi said, his gaze finding Genevieve's across the room. But since it concerns all of you, I wanted you all to be present. He crossed to where Genevieve stood by the fireplace, taking her hands in his. Genevieve Zeller, these past months have shown me what I was missing in my life. You and your children have filled this house with laughter and love. He knelt before her, still holding her hands. I'm asking if you would do me the honor of becoming my wife, of making this arrangement permanent, of allowing me to be a father to your children. Tears spilled down Genevieve's cheeks as she looked at the man before her, this steady, honorable man who had found them lost in the wilderness and led them not just to physical safety, but to emotional healing. Children? She asked, turning to look at the 10 faces watching intently. What do you think? It was Robert who spoke first, standing tall like the man of the family he'd tried so hard to be since his father's death. I think Pa would approve, Ma. Mr. Tucker Levi has been good to all of us, and he makes you smile again. One by one, the children voiced their approval. From Sarah's thoughtful, he feels like family already, to little Elizabeth's excited, does this mean we get to stay forever with the horses? Finally, Genevieve turned back to Levi, who waited patiently, hope evident in his blue eyes. Yes, she said simply. Yes, I will marry you. Levi Tucker. The cheer that went up from the children was deafening. James, standing slightly apart, caught Levi's eye and gave a nod of approval that meant more than words could express. Levi rose, pulling Genevieve into an embrace that felt like coming home. "I love you," he murmured against her hair. "All of you." "And we love you," she whispered back. They were married on New Year's Day, 1877, in the ranch house with the children as their witnesses and the local pastor officiating. Genevieve wore a dress that Sarah and the twins had secretly altered from her best traveling outfit, adding lace they'd found in an old trunk and fresh ribbons Levi had brought back from his last trip to town. As they spoke their vows before the fireplace, with winter sunlight streaming through the windows and reflecting off the snow outside, Genevieve thought of the journey that had brought them to this moment. What had seemed like a disaster getting lost in the vast Wyoming wilderness had led her to a man who saw her strength, respected her grief, and loved her children as his own. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the pastor declared. "You may kiss your bride, Mr. Tucker." Levi's kiss was gentle but filled with promise. And the cheers from the children, now his children too, made them both laugh as they turned to face their family. That evening, after a celebratory meal and much singing and storytelling, Levi found Robert alone on the porch, looking at the stars. "Cold night to be out here," Levi observed, joining his new stepson. "Just thinking about Pa," Robert admitted, wondering what he'd make of all this. Levi nodded, respecting the boy's honesty. "I never met your father, but I know he raised fine children. That tells me a lot about the man he was." "He wanted us to have land, to build something lasting," Robert said. "In Oregon." "We have land here," Levi replied carefully. "Plenty of it. Room to expand when you boys are ready for homes of your own someday." Robert looked at him sharply. "You'd do that? Let us build on your land?" "It's not just my land anymore," Levi said. "It's our family's land now, yours included." The significance of this seemed to settle over Robert. "I think Pa would be pleased with how things turned out," he said finally. "He'd be grateful to you for finding us, for saving Ma from having to do everything alone." "Your mother saved herself," Levi corrected gently. "She kept all of you alive against incredible odds. I just helped with the last part of the journey." He clasped Robert's shoulder. "I'm not trying to replace your father, son. I'm just hoping to honor his memory by continuing the work he began, raising his children to be good people." Robert nodded, emotion making it difficult to speak. Finally, he managed, "I think I'd like to call you Pa, if that's all right. Not right away, but someday." "I'd be honored," Levi said, his own voice rough with feeling. "Whenever you're ready." Spring arrived with a riot of wildflowers and new beginnings. The ranch, which had seen only 2 inhabitants for so long, now bustled with activity from dawn to dusk. Levi and James, with Robert and William's help, expanded the house, adding 2 new bedrooms to accommodate their growing family. Genevieve, finding herself expecting a child, a development that had delighted Levi beyond measure, oversaw the planting of a larger garden than the ranch had ever seen. The twins took charge of a new flock of chickens, while Joseph proved to have a natural way with the younger calves. Letters were sent to Genevieve's brother in Oregon, explaining the change in plans and inviting him to visit when possible. His reply, when it came, expressed genuine happiness for his sister and her children, along with a promise to make the journey to Wyoming the following summer. On a warm evening in May, Genevieve and Levi sat on the porch, watching the children play in the yard. Baby Grace, now walking confidently, toddled after Elizabeth and Hannah as they chased butterflies. The older children were engaged in a spirited game of tag, with James and Robert serving as team captains. "Do you ever regret it?" Levi asked suddenly. "Not continuing to Oregon? Changing your plans?" Genevieve rested her hand on her growing belly, feeling the flutter of new life within. How could I regret finding happiness? Finding you? Levi covered her hand with his own. Sometimes I can't believe how fortunate I was, deciding to follow those tracks. It wasn't just good fortune, Genevieve said thoughtfully. I believe Thomas was watching over us, that somehow he guided you to us, knowing you were the man who could love his children and his wife. Levi considered this, his expression solemn. I hope to be worthy of that trust. You already are, Genevieve assured him, leaning against his shoulder. You found us lost and led us home, not just to a place, but to belonging. As the sun began to set, painting the Wyoming sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, Levi and Genevieve called the children in for dinner. They came running, a tide of laughter and energy, filling the house with the sounds of family, the family they had become, against all odds, in the vast and unforgiving landscape of the American West. Years later, the story would become a legend in those parts, the tale of a woman with 10 children who got lost in the wilderness, and the cowboy who found their trail and led them all home. But for Levi and Genevieve Tucker, it wasn't legend but life, their life, built day by day, season by season, with love that had begun in desperate circumstances, but had grown to fill every corner of their existence. And when their 11th child, a son they named Thomas Levi Tucker, was born that autumn, the circle seemed complete, a testament to the past they honored and the future they embraced together, in a home that had room for all the love and memories they would create in the years to come.